Joining me now, Peter Switzer, founder of the Switzer Report. It's been an interesting week. Let's start over in the US first of all, Peter, with the rate cuts, the 0.25%, I think it was. We were talking about this mostly yesterday. But what's your view on that, and how can that be an issue for us here, if at all?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that this interest rate cut in the US, partly driven by the fact that Donald Trump is pressuring the central bank boss, Jerome Powell, to cut interest rates. But given the fact that we don't know what's going on with the trade deal and the potential economic implication of that, rate cuts in America really make a lot of sense. As soon as a trade deal is announced, and my fingers crossed that we will see one, then I think the US will stop cutting rates, because what will happen is, at the moment the US consumer is still playing ball and spending, but the business investment is really low, and that's what we need to see get elevated, uplifted, and a trade deal would do that, and that would mean that rate cuts aren't necessary.
How much do you think that would? How much do you think our Prime Minister might raise that kind of issue, particularly the trade talks? I mean, it's probably a foregone conclusion that he will discuss that with the US President Donald Trump. But is that top of the agenda?
Look, I'm sure it is, but with Donald Trump, I think Scott Morrison is going to have to be very subtle. He's not the kind of guy who's going to be strong-armed like the way he's strong-arming Jerome Powell. But I do think, that there's a vested interest in Scott Morrison talking about, look, it'd be great if Scott Morrison could come home from the dinner with the President and say to the Australian people that he thinks a trade deal is close. I think the Reserve Bank would love to hear that as well. And even if things are passed on to him that he can't publicly say, because it would be betraying the confidence of President Trump, at least if he could say it to Dr. Phil Lowe, our central bank boss, that would be very good, because what he decides to do, Phil Lowe, on Tuesday week with interest rates could well be determined by the expectations around the trade deal.
All right, jobs data that came out yesterday, Peter, it was expected to hold at 5.2%, the unemployment rate anyway. It's risen, though, to 5.3%. How much of a blow is that?
Look, it's a psychological blow, Pete. When you look at the numbers, they got something like, there's the 35th month in a row of rising employment, up 50,200 part-time jobs. I think in total, they were expecting only 15,000 jobs. So it was actually a good employment report, though you'd rather than be more full-time than part-time. But the last few months have been mainly full-time than part-time. The participation rate went up. Now, as an economist, we always say if the participation rate's rising, it's a positive forward indicator. But look, basically you don't want to see unemployment rising because it's psychologically bad. And in South Australia, it went from 6.9% to 7.3%. So they've got a few issues over there at the moment. But most of the other states were okay. There weren't big rises.
Tuesday week, is it now a near lock that there will be a rate cut here, or do you think it might be another month?
Personally, I hope they don't cut next month, in 2 weeks' time. First Tuesday in October, of course. But if the Prime Minister doesn't come home with some good news, or Donald Trump goes cold on the positive messages he's been putting out to the market, and the market's been accepting them, that's why the Dow Jones continues to sneak up most mornings. If that doesn't happen, then I think they're going to have to cut in October. But if the good news seems to be on the roll, I think the Reserve Bank Governor would love to wait to November to also see the impact of the tax cuts coming through, the impacts of the interest. And by the way, UBS thinks that we are going to grow by something like 2.4% this year because of the tax cuts, but it needs time to work in. So I think it's 50-50 with a slight lean to, yes, they will cut unless some good trade deal news comes through.
Up to 2.4%, that's a significant jump.
Correct. And I think that surprised me, because UBS and George Thorogood, the economist there, is not one of my kind of guys. He is a glass half empty kind of guy, and he thinks that the tax cuts will have a significant impact, and I hope he's right.
All right, Peter Switzer, founder of the Switzer Report. Appreciate your time this Friday morning. Have a good weekend.
Same to you, mate.